Hello, and welcome to the Synergy Sanctum. My name is Justin. Thanks for stopping by. Here at the Synergy Sanctum, I hope to provide you with Magic the Gathering deck building strategies focused on the Commander format. I will show you how all the cards work together to help you win, but I also will show you how they synergize with one another so that you're staying competitive and, most importantly, having fun. Today we will be going over one of my favorite decks. It is a group hug theme deck. Probably not the type of group hug that you're used to seeing. I do play it in a different way, but this deck is so much fun. You want your opponent's decks to go off. With a group hug deck, you want to help all of them go and get crazy, because if they're focused on killing each other, then they're not going to be focused on you and what you're doing, and that is what we will be trying to accomplish with this deck today. The commander for this deck is Selvala, Explorer Returned. This girl is awesome. She has this ability, Parlay. You can tap her. Everybody reveals a card. Each non-land card that is revealed this way, you get a life and you get green mana to spend. And then everybody gets to draw those cards. So the commander itself is helping everyone. It is hugging everybody at the table, but you are benefiting the most because you are getting life, you are getting mana, and you are controlling how much hugging goes on at the table. So as always, to start, we will go over the cards in the first section that are related to the mana in the deck, starting with Birds of Paradise. Birds of Paradise, everybody is aware, can just tap for any color, so you'll be tapping for either green or white in this deck. Mirari's Wake is an enchantment that comes in, it boosts your creatures, and whenever you tap a land for mana, it's going to double the mana that you're tapping. We are also running a Smothering Tithe, so anytime an opponent is drawing a card, unless they want to pay for it, you will be making treasures, which will be additional mana for you to cast the big spells that are present in this deck. And then we are also running a Soul Ring as always, which will give you an additional 2 mana if you tap it. Moving right along to the next section here is our draw section. We are running an Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel is a 1-drop when it comes in. If someone casts a non-creature spell, you get to draw a card unless they're willing to pay, which most of the time they're not willing to pay. We are also running an Alhammarit's Archive, which doubles up on life gain and doubles up on your draws. We are running a Scroll Rack, so you can pay 1 and tap it. If you don't like the cards in your hand, you can exile them, draw a new set of cards, and then put the ones in your hand back on top in any order. And then finally, combos really nicely with Selvala. We are running a Well of the Lost Dreams, so whenever you gain life, which you will be with Selvala, you can pay mana, and for however much mana you pay, you can draw. So for example, if you tap Selvala and everybody reveals a non-land card, that's going to be 4 life and 4 mana that you will be gaining at that moment. You can then use that mana at the same time based on the amount of life you gain, which was 4, to draw 4 cards. With this awesome ability that our commander has in this deck, we want to be doing that more than once a turn, so we are running similar cards that were run in the Krenko deck to be able to untap Selvala and get her ability more than once a turn or even on opponents' turns. So there are some global effects that may seem to help opponents, but you will be benefiting because you are getting life and mana and draw every single time that Selvala is tapped. So starting with an enchantment, Awakening, everybody untaps on everybody's untapped step. So every single untap step, you're going to be untapping as well, and you're going to get to keep going with Selvala. Similar to Awakening, Seedborn Muse will be targeted just to yourself, but you will get to untap on everybody's untapped step, so you can do Selvala on every single turn. And then there are single instances of untapping her as well within the deck. We are running a Wirewood Lodge. Because Selvala is an elf, you can pay a green to untap her and get her ability again to draw even more cards. We are running a Mage Ride Stone, which for 1 you can untap Selvala, and we are running a 1,000-Year Elixir, which is twofold. It will give her haste if 1,000-Year Elixir is out before she comes out, and then also you can untap her with this as well. And then we are running Umbra Mantle. So Umbra Mantle is pretty awesome, and it can be a combo piece in this deck if every single time you parlay with Selvala, you are hitting a non-land card, because for 3 mana, you can untap the creature that this is equipped to. So, if you have Selvala tapping and gaining you mana, you can immediately pour that mana into Umbra Mantle to untap her and keep going for however much mana you get off of the parlay ability. So now we will be moving into the group hug section of this deck. It is one of the bulkier sections, and again, it is very, very important to lean into the idea that you want to help your opponent's decks kind of go off. You want them to play a lot of creatures. You want them to cast their crazy spells, because again, they're going to see each other more as a threat than they will you, the group hug player who's just giving them mana and draws. So with these cards, you don't want to be stressing about like which opponent you're helping or anything like that. You want to be helping as many people as possible and then waiting for the moment to not hug anymore. But let's talk about the hugging first before we get into the cards that are going to make people not want to play this deck. So to start the hugging segment of this video, we are offering additional mana and lands to our opponents with Rainbow Veil. Rainbow Veil is a land that you can tap for any color, but when you tap it, you have to pass it to somebody else, and then they get to have it. So early on in the game, you can be establishing yourself as someone who's helpful, trying to help your opponents by giving them a land every single turn they tap it. You can be making deals to pass it back and forth, whatever you want to do. There are 3 cards in this section that give each player additional green mana just for showing up, just for taking their turn. As soon as they move into their main phase before combat, they're going to get additional green mana with each of these cards. So we are running Magus of the Vineyard. It is a 1-drop and gives everybody 2 green mana before their attack phase. So in their main phase, when they're casting spells, you're going to be giving them 2 additional mana to do so they can cast those spells even quicker. Very similar is Alatamri's Vineyard. It is an enchantment, so it is harder to remove, and it does the same thing by giving everyone additional green mana. And then we are also running Shizoku Color of Autumn. Gives everybody additional green mana at their upkeep, 3 green mana, and it does not go away until the end of that turn for that player. Continuing with this theme of giving mana, we are running an enchantment, Heartbeat of Spring. Anytime a player taps a land for mana, they're going to get additional mana, so you are helping your opponents again, but you are also helping yourself by doubling up your lands. We are running Oath of Lieges, which is pretty awesome. So at each player's upkeep, they're going to take a survey of the board. They're going to see if anybody has more lands than them. Very likely that people are going to have more lands to them when you're playing this type of deck, and they're going to get to go find a land out of their deck and put it onto the battlefield. We are running 2 spells that seemingly hug our opponents, but also have kind of a darker side to them that you can take advantage of depending. So Peer's Whim, you choose friend or foe. Friends get to go find a land, any land, doesn't have to be a basic land, and foes get a little bit of removal on their end by having to sacrifice an artifact or enchantment. And then we have Tempt with Discovery as well. This one is a little riskier, but a lot of the times, because it is going after any land out of the opponent's deck, they may take advantage of it, and if they do, for each person that goes and takes a land, you're going to get that many additional lands off of the search for this spell. We are also hugging our opponents with Life. Everybody loves Life in Magic the Gathering, and Arbiter of the Null Ridge is giving it to everybody. So this is a guy that's going to come in and level the playing field by making everybody's life total equal to whoever has the highest life total. For as much as Magic the Gathering players love having life in the game, what they love more is drawing cards, and you are going to help them do that even more with this deck. We are running Heartwood Storyteller. Anytime somebody plays a non-creature spell, all of that player's opponents get to draw a card. Rites of Flourishing is an enchantment. At the beginning of the upkeep for each player, they get to draw an additional card, and then they also get to play an additional land from their hands, again, just making people's decks go off, but it's okay, I promise. It's fun, it's awesome to see everybody stress out and have to fight each other while you're just sitting back passing out candy to everybody at the table. We are also running Howling Mine, which gives everybody an additional card at their upkeep. We are running a Temple Bell, which if you tap, everybody gets to draw a card. And then a very similar effect with the land Mokokoro, Center of the Sea. You can pay mana into it and everybody gets to draw a card. So in this hugging segment, we've covered a lot. We've given out lands, we've given out mana, we've given out draws, life. It seems endless, but there's one card that gives out way more all at once, and that is Tempting Worm. Tempting Worm is going to have all of your opponents play any amount of permanents from their hands. They can play creatures, artifacts, enchantments, lands. They can put their entire hand out if there's no sorceries or instants, and all of them do it at the same time. So immediately, everybody gets to just put all of their cards from their hand into play, except for you. But again, that's fine because you're just going to have this little worm coming in and everybody's going to have 5+ cards just entering the battlefield at the same time. A less drastic card than Tempting Worm is Oath of the Druids. This card is an enchantment that allows for everybody to survey the board again, see if anybody has more creatures than they have, and if they do, they can reveal cards off the top of their library until they find a creature, and that creature comes into play. Crazy. One of my favorite cards in a group hug type of deck is Gate to the Ether. It is an artifact that says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they can reveal the top card of their library, so this is before their draws, and if they reveal a permanent card, an artifact, enchantment, or creature or land, they get to just put that into play no matter how much it costs or how big it is. Awesome. So all of that hugging is well and good. We're going to be giving so many lands out. We're going to be giving mana, draws, creatures, anything that our opponents might desire. But we need to also be staying a little scary when the time comes. So you'll know when the time comes because your opponents will have already started killing each other. So you're sitting in the shadows, you're watching the chaos unfold from all of the mana and all of the hugging you've been doing, and you're going to come in now with your haymakers and your win cons and the craziest creatures that exist in green-white to just scare your opponents and have to have them then figure out how to deal with your threats. But they're not going to have the cards in their hand anymore because they would have already used it to survive your opponent's onslaught. So, starting with something a little simple here, but Avenger of Zendikar, when it enters the battlefield, for however many lands you have, you're going to get little plants, but then those plants are going to get bigger for each land that comes in. We are running a Blightsteel Colossus, which is a very scary creature, a indestructible 11/11, trample and infect. If an opponent takes 10 damage from infect, they are dead. It's over. Doesn't matter if they have 100 life or you gave them as much as you possibly could out of your deck. Doesn't matter, Blightsteel is going to shut them down and end the game. We are also running an Old Gnawbone. Old Gnawbone says that whenever a creature deals combat damage, you get to create that many treasures. And what's great about all of these cards is you don't have to work towards building this amount of mana to cast these, because every single turn Selvala is going to be generating you additional mana, and all of the cards that were hugging your opponents are also going to be helping you. So you can sometimes cast that Blightsteel Colossus on turn 4 or 5 if all of your mana is lined up correctly. We are running a Crater Hoof Behemoth. When it enters the battlefield, it's going to make all your creatures super big and scary, and it's going to be big and scary, and you can just swing out and attack all of your opponents. We are running a little bit of stacks with Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Activated abilities of your opponent's creatures cannot be activated anymore. So you gave them all these great goodies, all these treasures, these creatures that can do all these crazy things, and now you're saying they can't activate anything. Kinda mean. One of the win cons in the deck, Shaman of the Forgotten Ways. This is a mana dork. It's going to let you tap to add mana. However, its second ability is what is scary and what has won me several games when everything else seems kind of stacked against me. You can tap him and everybody's life total is going to become equal to the amount of creatures that they have in play. Now this might seem a little scary, but our commander Selvala is gaining us life every turn. So even if we only have 2 to 5 creatures and our life total goes down to 5, we can start gaining life right away with Selvala if she's out. We can start gaining life right away with all of these other cards that are in this deck that gain life. It's not as scary for us as it's going to be for our opponents, but it does have to be done at the correct time to make sure that you still come out ahead. We are running both Ulamogs in the deck, starting with Ulamog Infinite Gyre. It has Indestructible, Annihilator 4, which means when you attack with it, that opponent's going to have to sacrifice 4 things. When you cast it, it destroys a permanent. It shuffles your graveyard into your library. It's awesome. We are also running the other Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. When you cast it, you get to exile stuff. It also has Indestructible, and when it attacks, an opponent has to exile the top 20 cards of their library. With all the draw you're giving them, they're going to start regretting that when this guy comes out. Another big, scary green creature with Vorinclex Voice of the Hunger. You get to double up your mana. However, your opponents, when they tap lands, they do not untap during their next untap phase. This card is so mean in a group hug deck, but necessary if one opponent is going off more than others. Curse of Exhaustion. If you cast this and enchant an opponent, they're only going to get to play 1 card a turn, 1 spell a turn. The next card is going to make your opponents feel like the hugging is never coming again, and they're not going to want to play anymore. It's going to cause a lot of chaos, and that is Time Shifter. So Time Shifter says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, you're going to remove the top card from the game, and whichever card is the highest mana cost, that player gets to take the next turn. So turn order is no longer going to be a thing when this card is out, because it's going to be based on whether or not you are revealing the card that is the highest versus all of your other opponents, or whether they're revealing the card that's the highest versus you and everyone else. So as you can see, this deck went from hugging everybody and being nice and just having fun times at the Magic the Gathering table to being very scary, very hated. Your opponents are going to target you quickly if you play any of the not hugging cards, so it is very important that you protect yourself and that you protect Selvala. So these next segment of cards is going to go over the cards that are protecting you and protecting your commander, so that everything you're trying to do does not get interrupted here. The first card is Comeuppance. Comeuppance is going to prevent damage that is being dealt to you. If it's prevented from creature sources, those creatures are going to take the damage, and if it's prevented from a non-creature source, then that controller, the person who casts the spell, is going to take the damage. Next, we have Constant Mist, which is a pretty messed up card, and you're not going to be even worried about the buyback cost because you're going to have so much mana and land happening at the table, but you're going to pay 2, you're going to be able to stop all the damage for the turn, and if you want the spell back to your hand after, all you got to do is sacrifice a land, and then you have it as an ace in the hole should you need it again. We are also running Avacyn, Angel of Hope, a very big white angel who, when she enters the battlefield, she is indestructible, and she gives all of your permanents indestructible as well, so all of your stuff is going to be indestructible. The only way of removing it will be to sacrifice or exile it, which a lot of people are not running a ton of that in their decks. We are running Michiko Konda Truthseeker. When a creature deals damage to you, that opponent is going to have to sacrifice a permanent. Pretty scary. We are also running a Peacekeeper. Peacekeeper does not allow for any creatures to attack, and you have to pay a cost, otherwise he will be sacrificed at your upkeep. Platinum Angel is also in the deck. You cannot lose the game, and your opponents cannot win the game, so kind of delays the game a little bit should stuff start not going your way. We are running a Sylvan Safekeeper. You sacrifice a land, and you can give a target creature Shroud for the turn, so if someone's trying to target Selvala, you can protect her. The deck is also running a Sun Titan. When Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you can return something that is a converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if any of these little baby creatures die, you can bring them back. If you have fetch lands or anything in the graveyard, you can bring it back as well. Kind of just there should you need to recur a permanent that was destroyed by your opponents. Wall of Reverence gives us a little life gain here and is also a 1/6 defender, but at your end step you can gain life equal to the power of a target creature that you control. Asceticism is an enchantment that allows for your creatures to not be the target of spells or abilities that your opponents control, and should a board wipe occur where everything's going to get destroyed, you can pay to regenerate your creatures as well. We are running 2 forms of protection for opponents attacking you, the first being Ghostly Prison. Should your opponents want to attack you, they have to pay an additional 2 mana to do so, and we are also running a Norn's Annex with a similar effect, but it's an artifact instead. Privilege Position, very similar to Asceticism, but it's giving all of your permanents hexproof, so your opponents cannot target anything on your side of the board. And finally, this is a last resort, I would say, with this deck, but we have a land that will prevent combat damage from creatures, and that is Glacial Chasm. The only downside of this is it has a cumulative upkeep cost to where you're going to have to continue to pay life to keep this on the board. So it's not a land that I recommend playing until closer to the end of the game, the tail end of the game, because it's something that you're going to have to start paying for, so you want to make sure that you're getting use out of it and actually preventing the damage if your opponents are coming at you. Moving on to the next segment, for our removal cards, we have 4 of them. They are kind of hug removal cards with Oblation. Oblation is going to shuffle a permanent into an opponent's deck, and then they're going to get to draw cards. We are also running a new card with Druid of Purification. When it enters the battlefield, starting with you, everybody chooses an artifact or enchantment they don't control, and then all of those choices are destroyed once they are revealed. We are running 2 board wipes. The first is something that you can hugely benefit from if you have your Blightsteel or any of your Olamogs out, and it is All Is Dust, because each player is going to sacrifice all of their colored permanents. So anything that is not colorless is going to be sacrificed with this card. And we are also running Vanquish the Horde, which costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. It's going to destroy all creatures. So as you can see, there are some key cards in this deck that allow for you to kind of control the game at any given state, allow for you to kind of do something that's either not hugging or wanting to hug at a given moment, and kind of play the politics a little bit with your opponents to make sure that you're staying alive and continuing in the game. So for this next section, it's very important that you have several tutors in the deck to tutor out whatever you need in the moment. So starting with Aladdin's Call, it costs 2 mana, and you can go search for a creature in your library, any creature card, and put it into your hand. We are also running Worldly Tutor. Worldly Tutor only costs a green. You can again go search for a creature card out of your library, but instead it goes to the top of your deck instead of into your hand. However, if you do this before you tap Selvala, you can draw that card immediately. We are running Green Sun Zenith for that Craterhoof Behemoth to come out, or for a Vorinclex or Old Gnawbone or any of the big green creatures. You pay a green and X, and you get to tutor out a creature card that costs X or less from your library to the battlefield directly. With all of the enchantments that have been mentioned in the deck and them being very key to the gameplay and the synergy of this deck, you also want to run an Idyllic Tutor so that you can go and find those enchantments out of your library and get them to your hand so that you can play them. And finally, probably one of the scariest tutors, I will say, and while it is an enchantment, it does get kind of ridiculous in this deck. So for what we've covered so far, you are giving your opponents a lot. You're giving them creatures, you're giving them draws. Their board states are going to be a lot crazier than yours. And Defense of the Heart can level the playing field pretty quickly here. Defense of the Heart, if somebody has 3 or more creatures, you can sacrifice it and go find any 2 creatures you want out of your deck and put them onto the battlefield. You can go get your Avacyn to make stuff indestructible. You can get your Blightsteel. You can get your Olamogs. You can get any of the crazy not hugging cards that we went over and really just become the threat at the table on a single turn. But because of how big and crazy these creatures are, it's going to be hard for your opponents to deal with it. And they're not going to see it coming because you were just hugging them the last turn by giving them all the mana and creatures that you possibly could. The win cons for this deck in the final section here are kind of focused on the life gain aspect of the deck. So we are running an Angel of Destiny, which I think is an awesome card. Angel of Destiny can help you and an opponent gain life. However, if you have 15 or more life than your starting life total, which is going to happen with all of the cards that we've kind of went over here. So if you're at 55, anybody who was attacked by Angel of Destiny is going to lose the game. Hecka scary. We are also running an Aetherflux Reservoir. Aetherflux Reservoir says that if you pay 50 life, you can hit somebody for 50. So it can just end the game right there. It's like a Death Star for someone. The next win con that we have in the deck is Approach of the Second Sun. So Approach of the Second Sun, if you cast it for the first time, it's going to immediately go 7th from the top to your deck. And that might seem unattainable in other decks. However, with Selvala, you're going to draw to that 7th card pretty quickly, and you're going to have the mana available to cast it again. So short of a counterspell stopping you, this has won games for me as well. And then the final card in the deck is one of my favorite cards, and it is so fun and annoying for everyone else, but Reverse the Sands. So you can take a beating with this deck. You can go down to 5 or less life and be comfortable with a card like Reverse the Sands in your hand, because Reverse the Sands is going to allow you to redistribute the life totals and choose who has the life after this card resolves. So let's say you're at 5 life and your opponent's at 60 and they've been running the game since you've been hugging them so much. You cast Reverse the Sands, you're at 60 and they're now at 5 and on the ropes. It's awesome, and it's one of the best ways that I play to win with this deck. And with that, that is all I have for you today with this group hug deck. I have other group hug decks as well that are as fun as this one, but get even crazier when we get into colors like red and blue as well. So if you'd like to see those, please comment on this video. Also, if you enjoyed this video today, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Thank you for watching.